the crazy thing, right, is in general, the best analogy I have for this is imagine if you went to go renew your driver's license, right? There's a one-page form, there's these boxes you fill in, it's pretty simple. The VA claim is the exact same way. But now imagine that the driver's license agency, the DMV, turns to you and says, well, we're not going to give you a license because you didn't actually provide this other document that shows X, right? That shows a connection between your need to drive. And that's what the VA is. It says, here's the form to fill out. But if you just do that, you will not get your benefits. And they don't tell you how to, generate or create the substantiating evidence. There's no help for that. And there's no help from any other parts of the process, like the exams the veterans have to go through, which that's a whole other story.
Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
Pollster and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast, Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
And Dustin Olson, pollster at American Pulse. They work for both Republicans and Democrats. And he hosts a podcast, Political Trade Secrets. Oh, we love that. We like that podcast.
Now, from Washington, D.C., is pollster Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. We have an extra special episode today. We're going to be pulling back the curtain and revealing a lot of what America's finest, our veterans, deal with when they transition into civilian life, what they deal with their benefits, and how maybe they can navigate that a little bit better. I'm honored to have Lukas Simianer on. He's the CEO and founder of vetclaims.ai. We're going to learn about his journey and how he got to where he is with a wonderful company called vetclaims.ai. He's also a Purple Heart recipient and a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne. Looking forward to that conversation and being able to better understand what our war fighters deal with in their life post serving our country. If you like this kind of content, if you'd like to help the show, the way to do it is to like, follow, and subscribe on wherever you enjoy your podcasts. If it's YouTube, if it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is, it really does make a difference. Also, leave a review. We do appreciate that. Another way that you can be part of the conversation, you know about my company, American Pulse Research and Polling. If you'd like to help us add to the conversation in this country, to give the American people a voice to determine the kind of topics that we give people the opportunity to have their voice heard on. You can go to pollingclub.com. We have a new Polling Club community where people suggest questions for our next survey. They get access to all of our surveys when they come out. They get early access, as well. The premium members have our full archive of surveys over the years to all of the insights that we have. Plus, we provide insights on other people's surveys, but do check that out. But without further ado, I'm going to go to our conversation with Lukas Simianer. Lukas, it's great to have you here today. Welcome to Political Trade Secrets.
I am honored to be here, Dustin. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the first thing I just want to get into is, I'm impressed by the work that you've done to help your fellow veterans in navigating life after their service. But you had to have had a moment sometime in your childhood, I don't know when, but when you decided that this is how you were going to this is what you're going to do with your life. What was it that had you decide to go into the Army?
A lot of it was my grandparents. My grandma was in the Women's Army Corps. My grandpa was a career, started in the Navy, finished in the Army. And just seeing that, there's a lot of pride in that. They got married when they were in the Army is a pretty big part of my family history. For me, I think the real catalyst, though, was the invasion of Iraq. I guess I would have been in I don't even know what grade, but I remember watching the O'Reilly show, and just these kind of crusty night vision goggle videos of the invasion happening, and thinking that's what I want to do. And also being a kid, seeing 9/11 occur and wanting to go, and I guess immature me would put it as exact vengeance for what we perceived to be done to us, and that was enough to get me going. So I joined at 17 years old. Mom had to sign a permission slip.
That's amazing. And thank you for doing that. What was your experience like when you, what was a little bit of a awakening going into the military? Was it a different life? Where did you grow up, by the way?
So I was born in Nebraska and raised in like Roanoke, Virginia. I was going to say small town, but I don't really think it's that small comparatively.
No, it's not that small, but yeah.
But raised in Roanoke, Virginia, and it was a bit of a shock. A lot of it I thought was like this rite of passage type thing, and ultimately, I didn't find that, but I did find a lot of pride in going to airborne school, being a part of the 82nd, so on and so forth. So there's definitely some cool ups and cool moments in that.
I'm always fascinated by the folks who have served in different services and what that transition is like going from Navy to Army. I've known a number of people who are in Air Force and Navy. What is that like? It's almost like going from being on, for the Army Navy game, what do you do?
Yeah, I think the transition, to civilian life is definitely the hardest thing. I can't speak myself for, the transition between the two branches or other branches, but, doing what I do at Vet Claims and having not only a company full of veterans from different branches, but also helping veterans from every single branch. They have far more in common than one would assume, even given the stereotypes, right? Everybody likes to poke fun at the Air Force, but the same things can apply. Sometimes they just manifest in different ways.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. One of the things that I think a lot about is in life, you get to have lots of different experiences. You can have lots of different talents that you pick up that put you into a unique position to do something. And with what you're doing now with vetclaims.ai, having served in two different services, you have a bigger view than what someone else might have, understanding a different perspective. I think I don't know if you've ever thought about that probably has had an impact on what you're doing now.
No, to clarify, sorry, my grandpa served in the Navy and then the Army. I was only in the Army.
Oh, I see. I got it. Okay.
Yes. No, I was just in the Army. I did 3.5 years. I was wounded in Afghanistan, and that pretty much started my road out of the Army.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, but still, having had family members in other services, you get a different perspective.
Definitely, most definitely. And the perspective that gets enriched every day as we learn. We had our first Space Force veteran come through the company the other day.
Really?
Everybody wanted to talk to him. They're like, "What is it actually like?"
And what is it actually like?
The Space Force is a hyper-intellectual branch that's very selective for very few jobs, and it is much more of an office environment. It is in the military we call it a gentleman's course. They're not smoking you, they're not beating you up as much. It's a respectful place, and that is so far the representation we've had from the Space Force, which is kind of to be expected and cool.
So you left the service in 2013, is that right?
Yes.
And what was that experience like for you? This is something that everybody who's served has to deal with at some point. What was that like for you?
For me, that was, I think it's fair to say it was one of the roughest points of my life. You go, especially I joined at 17, was out at 20, right? I'd been to war and wounded, lost friends, so on and so forth, before I was old enough to buy my first legal drink. And so I didn't have a grasp of what the real world actually consisted of. In the military, everything's where to be, what to wear, when to eat. It's very clear and laid out for you. You have a kind of, I don't know if I'd call it a support system, but you have an accountability system, right? You have resources that are there. And when I transitioned out, I didn't. So I ended up finding myself battling homelessness, relying on a food pantry for a bit, and eventually, getting away to get into like a double wide trailer. And that was when I, landed a job, and it was just it was a very trying time. And a lot of what I went through in that process is exactly why I built vetclaims.ai, is to try to help veterans fast track access to their benefits so that they can get to a position in life where they can actually take bets on themselves.
Yeah.
Because that for me is when everything started to go up and to the right.
How long did that process take?
For me to get my benefits, it took about 6 years.
Wow.
The VA denied me being within 3 feet of an explosion. the VA denied me for migraines secondary to traumatic brain injury. And the TBI was documented, the loss of consciousness was documented, many other things documented. But the VA, and I can get as nerdy and detailed as you want with that, but they denied me for the same thing repeatedly. And until I started doing research on my own behalf and writing separate documents to attach to the claim, they just kept denying it.
Yeah. So it's kind of shocking. So 6 years to make this happen, and you are a Purple Heart recipient. Is this related to that situation? Yeah. And yet still it took 6 years. They gave you a medal, but they wouldn't give you the benefits.
Yes. Yeah. And the crazy thing, right, is in general, the best analogy I have for this is, imagine if you went to go renew your driver's license, right? There's a one-page form. There's these boxes you fill in. It's pretty simple. The VA claim is the exact same way. But now imagine that the driver's license agency, the DMV, turns to you and says, well, we're not going to give you a license because you didn't actually provide this other document that shows X, right? That shows a connection between your need to drive. And that's what the VA is. It says, here's the form to fill out. But if you just do that, you will not get your benefits. And they don't tell you how to, generate or create the substantiating evidence. There's no help for that. And there's no help for many other parts of the process, like the exams the veterans have to go through, which that's a whole nother story. But
well, we'll get into that more. So anybody who's watching now, we're streaming on all sorts of different platforms, and if you have questions, please do post those. We'll be following up with this post the episode. But from our audience, I asked for questions, and I have a question here. What is a large friction point that most vets get wrong during their transition?
Thinking that the VA is either there to help you or out to get you. The VA is neither. In my experience, they're very neutral, but a lot of veterans don't realize that the entire weight of connecting the dots is on them. Yeah. So when it comes to the benefits side, you have to make things as clear as possible because they're not going to go through extraneous effort to help you. When it comes to the general transition and a friction point, I think it's accruing. Depends on the individual situation, but if you can start using your educational benefits before you go buy a new car, buy a new house, and increase your cost of living, right? A lot of vets do that. They seek this instant stability, which is understandable after the military, but they then kind of price themselves out of being able to make themselves more valuable quickly.
So they can't go and do education or whatnot.
Yeah, they get out and they're like, well, I'm going to get this brand new truck. I'm finally out of the military, and I'm going to get, a nicer house because I've saved all my leave days and whatever it may be, right? I'm selling the house that I had on base. Something good's going to happen. I'm going to get a bigger house. But then they're so, dependent on whatever job they have that they can't work less hours to go to school more, or take time to go to a trade school, or, money's so tight because they've inflated their lifestyle now that they can't invest themselves in other ways, whether it be buying a few books a month or using something like Coursera.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mentioned to you before we started that we're a SkillBridge participant, which, if people don't know, this is something, if you have a company out there, you've experienced some frustration with it, which I understand. It takes something to become it. It's not something that's easy, but if you are a company that wants to help our veterans, and you've been in existence for 3 years, you can sign up to be a SkillBridge applicant and help veterans or soon-to-be veterans transition out of their military service into civilian life, into a different job. And oftentimes, you're going to be hiring folks. It's not always the case, but it's a great way for veterans to get placed in jobs, or to learn how their skills that they learned in the military can apply to another profession, or develop new skills that they can do with that. And something that's clear to me watching folks go through that is that there's a lot of stuff that's thrown at them as they're doing that transition. and I can't imagine navigating all of that. Is that partly what? So that's partly what you do with vetclaims.com or .ai.
Yeah, so vetclaims.ai right now is hyper focused on just making the fastest and most efficient way possible for veterans to access their benefits, right? And actually have preparation, support, clarity, and understanding through the process.
When do they start that? Like, when should they start that?
So if someone is still in, right, they have a window for BDD, benefits delivered upon discharge, which opens up at 180 days from discharge and closes at 90 days before discharge. The ideal time to reach out to us is probably about a year out, because especially if you're retiring, there's this thing called the master problems list. And what a lot of vets will do, retiring or not, is they'll attribute a lot of things to just age. Like, oh, I don't know how I'd connect that to service. And it's like, oh, you definitely can. A lot of veterans are too tough and they don't realize what's actually hurting them, or they haven't actually taken the time to get real medical care in the meantime, right? For fear of losing some sort of status, or, the general disdain that the military likes to throw at people for going to sick call it's one of the universal truths across all branches. And so we help people navigate that, and coming to us about a year out from separation is ideal.
Yeah, that's great advice. And something that no one would actually, why would you ever know to do that? Are there other resources that people should be looking at around that time period?
Yeah, I think that it never hurts to start. I can speak for myself. We've had a couple people reach out and say, hey, I'm getting out in 6 months and I would love to come work for you.
Yeah.
And, we're not an old enough company to be in Skillbridge just yet. We did hire over 200 veterans in 2025 alone.
That's amazing.
And so, we will do our best to either point them in the right direction, or if they've, got something where we want to work together, bring them into our shop. Specifically, I don't know what happened, but the Coast Guard, it seems like we get a pretty recurring list of people getting out of the Coast Guard. They're like, I want to come over, and we love it.
I have a question here. Would you recommend certain VSO organizations over others, VFW, WWP, etc., from our audience?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I have many, many feelings about the VSOs.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute with what you're doing in DC right now.
But when it comes to this question, there's not a singular organization I would recommend over the other. The truth about VSOs is that 99% of them are great people doing the best they can with what they have. In general, the thing is, if you know someone, right? If a friend of yours has used a VSO and they ran it right, they communicated, they helped them get prepared, they didn't leave them hanging, they didn't make them wait 5 months to just get one 30-minute appointment. If you know someone that is good, and they do definitely exist, that is who I would recommend you go to and use.
Okay. Well, one of the things I'm curious about, so I want to focus a little bit more on the job placement side of it. What people should do, like part of it's networking, part of it, like what is it, like when you got out, what would you have liked to have known about getting a job that you wish someone would have told you?
I wish someone would have told me that my only options weren't use the GI Bill to go get a 4-year degree or 2-year degree, or work a blue collar job. Right. And both of those options are fine, but neither of which was really all that appealing to me. I've learned now that there's so many amazing, cool trade schools, certifications, things that you can do that, they're not mass investments of time, and you can get on your feet and start to gain some stability pretty quickly. And I wish that someone, would have put something more comprehensive together to explain that to me, instead of the 2-minute, 50-second TAPS class that I got that told me about how to look for veteran jobs or veteran preferred jobs on usajobs.com.
Yeah. So tell me about the boot camp. And and also I assume this is partly how vetclaims.ai came about, but tell me about boot camps and what veterans can do for that, for like programming or.
Oh yeah. Those are so interesting. So I went through the UT Austin boot camp. It was ran by a company called Trilogy at that point. And, I did get an engineering job afterwards. I will say those things are very interesting, and doing your diligence is very, very, very critical, because, all schools are essentially for profit in one way or another. But these boot camps, it's not that they're predatory as much as it is if you're not treating it like a beyond full-time job, like if you're not going 60 hours a week, you're really not going to come out of it with a competitive outcome.
Yeah.
And I've seen that. You know, I can't speak to all these boot camps, but I've seen that be very true for the engineering boot camp. Only 3 other people got engineering jobs out of the class of 50 that I was in, so a total of 4. And then I've got a few friends that have gone through like the UX and UI type boot camps, and those have been a bit more even placements across the classes. But yeah, diligence is key, but it's a quick way to get something moving.
Yeah. So you'd say due diligence, but is that a good approach? Like gain another skill that it's marketable?
I think so. I think that, you know, if I peel this back a layer, the big thing isn't, just what boot camp or, you know, is boot camp a good idea? I think one of the big problems is no one teaches anybody, much less veterans, how to reverse engineer where they want to be, right? What do you want to wear to work every day? What kind of car do you want to drive? What kind of house do you want to live in? How much money do you need to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
To have that outcome, and reverse engineering your way to that instead of just saying, well, I think this will be a marketable job skill, right? Because, you know, I can speak to engineering. You know, when I moved to Austin in 2018, it was like the modern day gold rush for engineering. If you could write a few lines of code confidently, you could make $80K.
Wow.
And that was pre-inflation dollars, so that was real money. And you know, but I look at what's happened to engineering now with AI, you know, essentially replacing and mitigating the need for a lot of junior engineers. If you don't truly love that and you don't truly see it as your path to where you want to go, you know, you're just going to end up with a really cool piece of paper that costs you a bunch of money. That's my big piece on that.
That makes sense. So one way, when I was preparing for this, that was put to me is, you know, a lot of veterans, and you kind of said it, you know, having everything in one place is, you know, do this, don't do this. Like, what would you say to somebody as they're making that transition? Do this, don't do this. Like, don't waste your time on X, Y, or Z. What would be your what would you fill in for those?
Yeah, that's a big one. You know, I would tell a lot of veterans to not rush lifestyle inflation, like I said before, but also not rush making a giant decision.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you're going to move, perhaps pursuing a certain job or a career field. Like LinkedIn is one of the coolest things ever, mainly because you can ask someone in a career field, and 9 times out of 10, if you tell them, hey, I'm a transitioning veteran, this is the career field I want to go into, is there any chance you'd have a 30-minute Google Meet with me, 15-minute Google Meet? Can I buy you coffee, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually begin to understand what is their daily life like, and you can potentially make a great connection as well. So when I say due diligence, it is, what do you actually want to be doing? Because a lot of people get into jobs and it's not, you know, maybe they like the the act of performing it, but they don't realize where that sits in like a corporate hierarchy, or the potential politics that are involved, or the travel. I've got a lot of friends that are consultants, and they saw the paycheck that was involved with going to Accenture or Deloitte or where have you, but then they realize, you know, that paycheck, a lot of it goes into the amount of suits you have to wear, the quality of suits you have to wear,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of travel, you know, and then also what it does to your body and how you take care of yourself through this, right? Or
Yep.
So there's just so many considerations, and don't rush it would be my biggest thing. And do reach out to people. Don't be scared to have a little weird conversation, because you never know where it can take you.
Totally. Well, I imagine when, one thing I've noticed from doing the Skill Bridge program is it is a bit of a challenge. You're going from military where you have, you know, in the private sector, as you know, you've started a startup. You don't know necessarily how much you're going to make next month, or, you know, a year from now, or if this whole thing's going to blow up and never work. It's a much different world in the private sector as to how things could go. There's a little bit more of you know, curveballs on the financial side. It's a different scenario, and I've noticed there's definitely concern for folks making that transition, you know, not knowing how that's going to go. One other thing that I've picked up is that depending on what your specialty was, that it can be a bit of a challenge to translate that. I've heard also that it's a difficulty sometimes for employers to understand how somebody who might be infantry, how that can apply to their business and in hiring that person. So what would you say to that, and what advice would you give?
I'm biased here. Like I have to be open about that. I was a scout myself, combat arms, and when you are combat arms, and I can speak to this very well with my company, you belong in a startup. 9 times out of 10, that is the coolest thing you're going to find, and it is painful because startups come and they go, right? They fail, a new one begins. You start your own, you do whatever, right? But what I have found is that in a startup, you're so closely attached to the mission.
Mm-hmm.
All veterans typically want to serve. That's where they find fulfillment, is in service. They want to be of service to something bigger than themselves. It's probably why you joined in the first place. When you are at a startup, you're so much closer to it. You're closer to the fight. What you do matters, and you feel it. And that is just my biggest thing is, gosh, if you're combat arms, go try to get in a startup, right? That sounds crazy, and it might be horrible advice, but it is mine. Not financial advice, mind you.
Yeah,
but
there could be an upside if you hit pay dirt. You might be a billionaire. Who knows?
But I think that's part of it, though, is like regardless of the outcome, you are in the fight, right? You're in the fight to grow and do a thing, to beat the odds, and I think that money matters, right? But at a certain point, if you can go to the grocery store without looking at your bank account, you're pretty rich in my book. And so as long as you can check that box and you can do something that you're engaged in every day, I don't know that there's a bigger blessing you can ask for.
Yeah, well, that's excellent advice, and actually something I would add to it, depending on where you are in an election cycle. I can tell you that there are campaigns all across the country who would love to have a military veteran work on their campaigns. Are they going to be high-paying jobs? No, but to become a field director on a campaign, that's totally something you could do. And guess what? You're going to meet a lot of people, and a lot of people who will be interested in helping you make your transition to whatever is next. Actually, I can think of a few people who I've hired over the years for campaigns that was one of their early jobs after leaving the service. And, politics is a great place to build a very large network. So that is a good suggestion. What other fields would you say would be good for someone, especially in combat arms?
It's funny you say that too. I worked on the Rand Paul campaign when I was in college when he was running, and that was some of the most fun I'd ever had. Well, that was, I guess, yeah. And I think the similarities between that and a startup are very, very high.
Yeah, it's mission oriented, and campaigns. Well, the term campaign is a military term. Ultimately, yeah. A lot of the stuff, you talk about being in the trenches with people on a campaign, and there's a lot of military terminology, but it is a very intense experience in a short period of time. And that's what made me think of that, based on how you were talking about startups.
Yeah, I think that's a very fun and very perfect alignment for it. And the other big thing is look at these really niche trades, right? What is, I mean, I shouldn't say it can't be, but what is unlikely to be outsourced or given to AI, right? Heavy machine operations, very skilled things. One of the cooler ones, like a respiratory therapist, right? You can make as much as a nurse and go to school for like a quarter of the time. What? There's plenty of things that are like you can kind of fast track your way to a place of stability, and then take bets on yourself, or then become more valuable. Whatever your life and mission dictates. But finding those niche things, I mean, that's probably a great query for ChatGPT. Yeah. What niche certifications can I get that pay more than $65K and take less than a year to attain? Boom. Put that into ChatGPT.
That's awesome. So let's fast forward from you. So you've made your transition. It was a difficult challenge for you, and you made it through. And you got to the point where you had the idea. What gave you the idea? Was it that experience to create vetclaims.ai, and what were some of the things that led to that?
Yeah, so my first company was actually a company called Inclusive. I built the world's first e-learning platform for blind people and sold it into state vocational rehab agencies around the country. And it was a very cool thing to build. It was very fun. I raised $4.5 million in venture capital, went to Techstars, all while having a company that was half blind. right? It was pretty unique experience. And, ultimately the government ended up killing that company, right? And that ties into the story of why I built this the way I did. Between that company and starting vet claims, I worked for a government agency, and I was an advisor for digital transformation at the Open Source Directorate, and it was very, very fun. And in that, I was interviewing these AI companies, but also working with veterans and former clandestine agents and former special operators, to assess how we're going to build certain tools. And in that process, I was talking to one of the guys who had been shot like 3 times, blown up more times than I could count, been on more deployments than years I'd been alive, probably. We were having lunch, and he's like, what's your rating? And we were talking, and I asked him, and he said, well, 30%. It was just mind-boggling to me.
Can you explain that a little bit to folks who may not be familiar with what that means?
Yeah, so the VA disability rating system goes from 0 to 100%. And it's, VA disability is really, it's not akin to civilian disability where it's saying you can't work. It is the equivalent of workman's compensation, because when a service member is injured or receives malpractice in the military medical system, they have no recourse. They can't sue their employer for getting them injured on the job. They can't sue the doctors for doing something heinous or wrong. And so it's more of a workman's comp thing, and it's based upon the different disability. They have these different ratings, and the complexity goes deeper from there. But to say that, someone who is 100% is typical of someone who has been shot, blown up, or has, full body injuries of the joints, limited range of motion, the elbows, knees, back. They're probably not going to age that well.
Yep.
That's typically what that's indicative of, right? It's not always a visible wound, right? It's not always an amputation, but it is these things hurt you. You have to live with it, and it affects how you perform in your daily life, picking up your kids, walking your dog, going to the bathroom. So that's how the disability system works. And this guy who had done so much for our country and been hurt so much only had a 30% rating, which was very far from proper, right? With that, I went to go find him resources. I began doing research, and the more research I did, the more I found that nothing had changed since I got out. And I was like, how is this a thing? And so I'm interviewing these AI companies and learning about their leadership philosophy of how they're building their things. And it just hit me. I was like, why am I not augmenting humans? Why am I not augmenting veterans with the ability to help other veterans? And so, and then I had this decision. Do I build the thing that helps the government solve the problem and hope that they do the right thing? Or do I build the thing that solves the problem and becomes so big and loud that the government can't ignore me? Well, in round 1 with Clusive, I hoped the government did the right thing, and they didn't. The second we became so efficient at threatening government jobs, they said, we don't really like that,
Or,
And with this, I said, well, we'll build outside of the system and build something that can be integrated to the system to ultimately solve this problem. That's where it started.
that's awesome. And what's the ride been like since?
The ride has been absolutely wild. We launched in September of 2024, and we were by October of 2025, we were the volume leader in claim services for the country, helping over 4,000 veterans a month. The legacy competitors in the for-profit side of the house, they were capped out at about 3,000, 3,300. We hit 4,000 per month and continued scaling. We created over 250 veteran jobs now since we started.
Wow.
In 2025 alone is over 200 jobs that we created for veterans and veteran spouses and military spouses. And we've now helped cumulatively over 22,000 veterans get the rating they deserve. We've cut the VA claim cycle down. So typically veterans go through 4 to 6 claim cycles. I file a thing, I appeal a thing, 5 to 6 times.
Wow.
We've cut that down to an average of 2. And in company history, we've had one go no further than 3.
That's amazing. So basically some ticky-tack thing that, they come back and say, well, you have to do this. And so then you have to resubmit. That's basically what people are going through. And you're reducing that bureaucratic brain damage.
Yes. And it falls both, to some degree, it falls to the veteran side because there's a lot of reading that you would have to do to actually do this holistically right. It's like reading the tax code versus going to TurboTax.
Exactly.
But similarly, this driver's license type analogy, the VA gives you the simple form and says just fill the boxes. But if you just fill the boxes, you're never going to get anywhere. You have to do work that isn't specified in order to win. which is a systemic issue, and we solve that systemic issue.
That's amazing. We have another question from the audience. Because of the work you're doing in AI, do you think transitioning vets should lean into the AI industry for employment and making themselves more marketable?
I think transitioning vets should do everything in their possible power if they want to be around AI. To not necessarily worry about AI engineering, because I mean, if you want to go to Stanford for 8 years, God bless. But if you don't, look at data centers. What can you be doing? Can you start a contracting company that does floor finishes for them, that does pipe fitting for them, that does any piece of minutia? Because that industry, it is the gold rush of the next 10 years, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another question we got: does VetClaims.ai help veterans after their initial claims, appeals, etc.?
Yes. So you pay us once, and we fight till it's done. Right? We don't charge for appeals. We never charge more than once. We don't take your back pay, right? Those are the big differences, and perhaps the biggest difference of us versus anybody out there in this market, outside of not taking your back pay, is that we have not only a money back guarantee, but if we can't help a veteran get the rating they deserve after an appeals cycle is gone through with us, we'll give you your money back plus $500 for wasting your time. That is how confident we are in our product and our efficacy.
That's awesome. What does it look like for someone to get started?
It's pretty simple. They just go to vetclaims.ai. You book a free call with my team. The sales team, it's not a high pressure sales call that they're going to just try to close you on. It's, you're going to leave that call, whether you work with us or not, with an advanced knowledge of how to pursue your claim. If you do work with us, you go through our process. There's an upfront cost, and that's it.
That's awesome. And for everybody watching, a reminder to start that at least a year out from leaving. And that's great. And what is the one-time cost?
$1,250. So we have like a firm, Klarna, Afterpay, all these options to break that up as well. So it's not one big lump sum, but the average price difference, and the big problem in this industry is that, the VA accredited lawyers will take 33.5% or 33% of your back pay. That can often average over $8,000 or more, depending how long it takes. Then you've got the people who take 5 or 6X, and they throw some membership fees and some crazy stuff, and their average comes out to about $700-800 as well. And so $1,250 versus potentially more, and everybody else will charge you every time you go through. Versus with us, once you come through, we've got you till the end. We're going to get you the rating you deserve, because vet claims to me it's not the last thing I build. It is the first step in my ecosystem that helps veterans get to a place where they can take bets on themselves.
That's awesome. Any indications of where you're going next?
The biggest demand is financial literacy. A lot of veterans, and I don't think I knew what a credit score was till I was 23. If there's some veterans listening, you'll appreciate this maybe. That military star card snuck up on me. It's a credit card that's issued to military members to finance their uniforms and such, which is a ridiculous notion anyways. But, I grew up single mom, pretty abject poverty, Section 8 housing, so forth. I really didn't understand credit score at all. And that, when it comes to getting to stability, getting to be able to take a bet on yourself, good God, that is a very critical thing to understand, because without it, everything else is compromised. So that's our next step. And we're looking in many directions to ultimately build an ecosystem that, veterans have vetted resources to be able to go to at every corner.
So if you're serving right now, and you don't know when you're going to leave or retire, it might be years from now, what would you say right now someone should start doing on the financial literacy side, or just simple actions that you should start doing right now?
The biggest thing, take pictures. Goodness. I don't care if you get like a DSLR or some basic digital camera, buy a big memory card, keep it in there, update it to the drive every so often. But like when you get a profile, right, or an injury or a report or a scuff or a scrape or anything, take pictures of it, because you don't know what's going to happen with your medical records. Yeah, at this point, everything should be digitized, but I can tell you for a fact, it doesn't always work that way, right? So especially if you're like downrange or in theater, document what's going on with you and just store it away, because when you do get out, you're going to want to be able to prove it. There's many things that would have made a lot of people's lives a lot easier, perhaps even saved some lives from the battle at home, if that kind of documentation was in place.
That's fascinating and amazing advice. How about on the financial literacy side? Like, what can someone be doing if they're, they're young and early in their military career, to prepare for later on?
I mean, it's hard, right? Because I don't know what the pay grades are now, but I was an E3, so the third rank listed up, with the extra $150, I think it was, a month for jump pay. And I remember my paychecks were $749 every 2 weeks. It factored out to something like $2.30 an hour. And so to tell some enlisted guy, hey, make sure you save 4 months of runway is kind of hard to do.
Yep.
But if you can, save as much as you can to give yourself runway when you get out. And don't accumulate things that are going to have payments, right, when you get out. If you get a car and you got 2 years left in, get a car that you can pay off in 2 years. That gives you maximum optionality when you do get out to go pursue a cool trip, or to go pursue the girl you met, at a Scandinavian cruise night. Now, you want to move to Oslo or something, or go to a trade school. Maintain maximal optionality for your exit. And that is, that alone sets you up for being far ahead of any of your peers.
And that's great advice, because then you don't have to feel the pressure of making a decision that maybe didn't feel like the best decision for you. Great advice. What else should what is there anything I haven't asked you that I should ask you?
In regards to the company, or
in company, or anything in your background that you'd like to share with people?
The one thing for every veteran and every person listening, there's this really silly misnomer out there that it's, what do you want to do with your life? And there's so much pressure, especially if you're a transitioning vet. And I want to reframe that for you. It is, what do you want to do next?
Yeah.
That's simple. Do not pressure yourself to think that you have to stick and commit. You get to try so many different things, and you can learn. I went to nursing school. Before nursing school, I was a cable guy. I drove concrete truck. I worked on the railroad. I went to nursing school. Oh, goodness. I was a military contractor. I taught myself how to code. I went to a coding boot camp, was an engineer, and then I was a product guy. And then I started a company. There's and then the first company did something completely different than the second company, and the third one probably pretty different too. So, know that you get to constantly learn, and that is the fun of this. You are not relegated to one career path.
Well, that's excellent. And with all of those different careers that you've had, I'm sure there's something from your military service, some skill sets or training or just lessons that you learned that informed that journey. What would you say were some of the lasting lessons that you had from your military service?
The biggest one is just the leaders eat last, right? I'm pretty sure that, in my company, I've got 250 plus people now. If someone were to badmouth me, the reaction would be visceral, if not physical, because I take such good care of my people. And you don't see that. You don't see that in the normal world. And I think that there's something really powerful about it. And I think it's one more reason why I encourage these combat arms veterans to get into startups, because when you take care of your people, when you orient on the mission, when you can be selfless, the people around you see that. And when you have a workforce, no longer a military unit, but a workforce of people that will run towards the sound of corporate gunfire, right? That is powerful, and it terrifies your competitors. And honestly, no one's going to keep up with you. And it's a superpower that I think, maybe I'm the first one to be really loud about this, but I know for sure I won't be the last.
Yeah, that's awesome. Excellent advice. Well, Lukas, thank you so much for taking time today. Thank you for what you're doing. One last thing I wanted to give you a chance to talk about. You are in Washington, D.C., and one of the things as a leader and someone who's dedicated your life to helping out veterans, you're here talking about the GUARD Act. Is that right?
I am, yes. The GUARD Act is a very dangerous thing. We can't quite point to what informed the initial creation of the language in it, but we do know that there's amendments needed. Ultimately, the GUARD Act is there to protect veterans from companies that are predatory, taking advantage of veterans. But what they're proposing in the federal government, right now it's in the House, to do, The GUARD Act in its existing language would essentially, it'd be the equivalent of me telling you can file your taxes, but only with the IRS. You can't talk to TurboTax. You can't talk to an advisor. You can't go to H&R Block unless we say that they're cool.
Yeah.
And the ultimate truth is that, if we look at what's existing right now, the current options, the current pathway, the current access path for a veteran to get their benefits is untenable. It's what's led to this 22 a day number.
Yeah.
Right. Veterans that have stability, benefits, health care that they deserve, they're not the ones that are dropping like flies. The ones that are denied, invalidated because they didn't know the magic sauce behind doing some mystical form that isn't really a form, those are the ones that we are losing at a high rate.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these parties, right? We of course have the lawyers that want to keep taking 33% of the back pay, even though the amount of work they do for the claim never changes. So why is it a rolling scale?
Yeah.
You have the other companies who want to take 5 or 6x of a veteran's increase, but the work they do never changes. So why is it a rolling scale? Then you have the VSOs, the VFW, the American Legion, the DAV, who historically have done amazing things for the veteran community, right? But at this point, and on the subject of veterans' disability specifically, these VSOs are no longer lobbying for what's best for veterans. They're lobbying for their own self-preservation because they're hemorrhaging membership at such numbers that they'll be non-existent if the last relevant thing they do goes away.
Yeah.
And as sad as that is, we need to regulate this market, and that is what we're lobbying for. That's what we're consulting for, is to regulate a market, because we are a capitalist country. I identify myself jokingly as a combat capitalist. I believe that the best solution possible will come from free market competition. And for anybody in government to say that we do not want the best solution possible for our veterans is a travesty. And I don't think they're doing that intentionally, but I think the wrong voices are being heard. And so that is why I'm here in DC, to make sure that the voice of the enlisted man and woman is heard loud and clear, that we want the choice to talk to who we want to talk to. And I hope everybody that's listening to this calls their representatives and says, the GUARD Act needs amendments.
And what specific amendments would make the difference here? Because ultimately what you're talking about is, it seems like there are powers that would like it to be a closed system that only certain people can be involved in. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
And that's what you're opposing ultimately.
Yes. There's, in this current one, there's actually nothing that actually helps consumer protections. That's part of it. But the number one thing we're pushing for here is that the current accreditation system it's a lackadaisical, like open book test, right? But it no less is accreditation. But there is not a mechanism for an organization to become accredited, only individuals. So, a lawyer could be accredited, a singular agent could be accredited, but a company, right? A system, a software technology, which is obviously the way literally everything else in this world has advanced, is not allowed, which makes you ask the question, why? And who's pushing for that? And so we are pushing for what we call the ACSO, an accredited service organization ability, right? We want there to be accountability for organizations, that businesses, for-profit, nonprofit alike, that want to compete, build the best systems for veterans, compete on the free market, and let veterans vote with their dollars and vote with their feet as to what these systems are. And ultimately allowing the free market to drive that forward will obviously produce better solutions the VA themselves can adopt. The other part of this that we're pushing for is that we want transparent pricing. To me, it is absolutely unacceptable, whether you take money on the back end or the front, that anybody charges a percentage or a multiplier. The amount of work, we helped 21,000 veterans last year. The amount of work that changes between veterans is, 1 to 2 hours, right? It's a matter of of de minimis margin.
Yeah.
We are the cheapest opportunity in the industry. And that's a whole nother thing, but we are the cheapest and most affordable out of everything. We also only charge once, no matter how many times you need help with appeals.
Yeah.
Obviously, we would not be in business if that model did not function. So why does everybody else want to hide behind these multipliers? So we want the bill to be amended and state that, whatever you're charging, right, you have to provide a dollar amount. The veteran needs to know what they're going to be charged, point blank, period, simple.
Yeah.
And there's other pieces of this that are, less major, but those are the two big things that really would allow us to have a free market competition to build the best solution for veterans.
Well, I can just tell you, having been involved in politics for a long time, there's incentives and disincentives at work. Somebody's getting their bread buttered some way, and they don't want competition. And it's just that simple. And what you're describing is you have a big bureaucratic system, and you're going to need to have a powerful system to be able to work, not work against, but work with that, which is what it appears you've built. Individuals doing their own individual thing are never going to overtake the big bureaucratic system.
I think the truth is that the bill in its current language should probably be renamed to the Old Guard Act, because all it does is protect the old guard. And that old guard is what has gotten us to 22 a day. And I want to say this too, that my biggest fear is seeing what's happening in Ukraine, the mechanisms of warfare that are developing, advancing. It's not Afghanistan. We're not going to have one IED that kills one soldier and wounds 3. We're going to have artillery and drones. We're going to have mass casualty events, the likes of which have not been seen since Vietnam or World War II. Should a peer-peer or peer-to-near-peer conflict arise, and those veterans at that scale come home to this system, that 22 a day will be a number that we long and wish that we could get back to. And that is why I fight so hard for this.
Yeah, that's a scary future, and let's hope that doesn't happen. But things are changing very quickly. Well, Lukas, thank you very much. Thank you for explaining that for the audience. Thank you for the great advice you have. Our intention is to get this in front of as many veterans as possible and current service members, so that they can get the advice from you and get what they need. Thank you for what you're doing for America's war fighters, and we really do appreciate you taking the time today.
I appreciate you so much for having me on and getting to meet you and your great team. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, that was Lukas Simianer, and talking to us about vetclaims.ai. If you are in the military or you are a veteran, you can go check them out to help you with your claims process and have an advocate on your side. And anyway, we just want to say thank you to him for his service for our country, as well as now serving those who've served our country as well. So thank you to Lukas and his team and what they do. And thank you for being here and for supporting the show and for lending your ear for this conversation. And if you'd like to help out the show, please do like, follow, and subscribe on wherever you enjoy podcasts. It really does make a difference for the show. And then also, if you're interested in our polling at American Pulse, you can go to pollingclub.com. We have our new polling community. I think we just posted some new content that I had created about current job approval numbers and how there's some discrepancies in those. So if you're interested in that, also right track, wrong track on a number of different metrics around the country, you can go check that out at pollingclub.com. But thank you so much for joining us today for another Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.